For 2,500 years, the galaxy existed in uninterrupted peace. Not the kind born from harmony, but from exhaustion. After millennia of devastating wars, species turned to diplomacy, bureaucracy, and fear of mutual destruction. The Galactic Council rose from those ashes, not as a symbol of hope, but as an instrument of control. War was outlawed, dissent crushed under the guise of unity. Armies disbanded. Weapons mothballed. Every new member was indoctrinated into a culture where conflict was taboo. The price of admission was submission, of will, of history, of memory. Peace became religion. Questioning it was heresy. Humanity arrived late. Barely a century ago, Earth was discovered and reluctantly accepted. The Council evaluated them as volatile, erratic, driven by emotion more than logic. Humans didn't hide their past, they carried it like a badge. The wars, the revolutions, the blood paid for freedom. It was alien to species who'd learned to trade liberty for quiet. Humanity's inclusion was a gamble, tolerated only to keep them under observation. Earth complied. No demands. No arguments. They sent diplomats, nodded in meetings, signed treaties. The Council believed time would dull their fire. That Earth, like the others before it, would conform. But humans weren't adapting. They were observing. Listening. Cataloging. While the Council dismissed them as primitive and unstable, humanity was studying everything: social structures, power dynamics, forgotten conflicts buried beneath polished speeches. Earth built no monuments on Council worlds. They asked no favors. They offered no threats. They watched, and the Council mistook silence for submission. Then, without precedent, Earth sent a single transmission. No embellishments. No negotiations. A direct declaration of war, addressed to the Galactic Council and every species under its banner. No explanation, no preamble, just an irreversible statement of intent. The Council chambers fell into chaos. Some thought it a joke. Others demanded an emergency summit. For days, arguments spiraled. Why would humanity defy everything the galaxy held sacred? Why now? What did they want? The shock wasn't in the threat, it was in the choice. No species had chosen war in over 2 millennia. Disputes were managed through compromise, extortion, or quiet elimination. But this was open. Defiant. Audacious. Peace was seen as permanent, an immutable constant. And Earth had shattered it with a single message. The Council responded with outrage. They condemned the declaration, labeled humanity a rogue entity. Sanctions were announced. Expulsion from the Galactic Order. Yet the core question remained unanswered. Why? Earth offered no answer. They moved with chilling precision. Fleets activated. Communications encrypted. Civilian transports grounded. Earth vanished from the Council's grid, slipping into strategic silence. The galaxy scrambled to respond, but had long since dismantled its teeth. What terrified the Council wasn't humanity's defiance, it was the intent behind it. They had faced rebels, extremists, and planetary insurrections before. Those were isolated. This was coordinated. Official. It wasn't chaos. It was cold, structured war. And that meant Earth believed in something enough to risk everything. The Council couldn't comprehend it. For them, war had been unthinkable for generations. It was a relic of an uncivilized past. Something conquered. But to humans, war was never a goal, it was a method. A bitter tool, used not for domination, but for change when all else failed. Earth hadn't lost control. They had made a decision. Not in anger. Not in desperation. But in certainty. And that terrified every ruler in the galaxy. Because it meant Earth saw something worth destroying the illusion for. The Council demanded answers. Earth responded with evidence. Entire civilizations erased from records, buried beneath fabricated peace accords. Species genetically altered to ensure compliance. Cultures stripped of identity, rewritten through Council-administered education systems. Thousands of years of quiet atrocities, all archived and exposed. Names of victims. coordinates of hidden camps. Signed orders from Council officials authorizing forced assimilation. Earth's message was simple: this peace is a lie. A silence purchased with the suffering of those too weak to resist. Humanity had discovered the truth not by accident, but by intention. Deep space expeditions, often dismissed by the Council as eccentric curiosity, were in fact reconnaissance. Black site surveys of forgotten colonies revealed generations of systemic abuse. Entire planets existed under artificial cultural suppression, where even language was regulated to erase history. The Council called it unity. Earth called it erasure. The Council's doctrine was built on suppression. Conflict, to them, was the ultimate failure. Stability was maintained through compliance, not justice. War was feared more than genocide. Their peace existed because the cost of defying it had been made unthinkable. Species that protested simply vanished. Their populations redistributed. Their records deleted. The illusion was preserved, and the galaxy called it order. Humanity rejected it. They presented a choice. Not to the Council, but to the galaxy. Public transmissions were sent across all known systems. Not propaganda, testimony. Survivors. Whistleblowers. Former officials confessing under oath. The message wasn't revenge. It was clarity. Earth demanded accountability. Acknowledgement. Structural dismantling of the Council's authority. Independent courts. Restitution for the silenced. Not conquest. Not dominion. Just truth. Justice. Transparency. The Council refused. They accused Earth of destabilization, of weaponizing grief, of playing savior to the galaxy for political gain. They labeled the evidence forged, the testimony coerced. They claimed Earth sought chaos. But the recordings were unaltered. The coordinates matched. Survivors began to speak, emboldened by the broadcast. Protests erupted across dozens of systems. Council leadership called for calm. Earth responded with silence. Then the first strike landed. Clean, precise, targeted. A data hub, not a city. No casualties, only exposure. Years of encrypted Council archives copied and released. Financial trails, bribes, execution orders. Every lie made public. Panic spread faster than retaliation. No one had anticipated a war of truth. Governments collapsed under the weight of their own secrets. Citizens demanded explanations, and no one had answers. Earth didn't threaten, Earth revealed. And that alone was devastating. This wasn't about territory. Earth didn't seize planets or strip resources. They didn't install human governors or enforce Earth law. Each action was surgical. Corrupt nodes disabled. Key figures detained and broadcasted during trial. Humanity operated like a scalpel, not a hammer. They weren't trying to dominate the galaxy. They were trying to reset it. Resistance formed quickly, but without direction. Military coalitions attempted defense, only to find Earth had already predicted their moves. Human systems had simulated hundreds of engagement patterns. The war wasn't reactive, it was prepared. For every fleet mobilized, Earth anticipated the maneuver, intercepted communications, disrupted supply chains. They fought with asymmetry, exploiting predictability. The Council realized, too late, that humanity had spent the last century preparing, not for war itself, but for this war. What shook them wasn't the destruction, it was the discipline. No civilian targets. No indiscriminate strikes. Every action served a moral function. It was retribution, but principled. Brutal in precision. Controlled in fury. Earth treated this war as a moral obligation, not a campaign. It terrified those who only understood war as conquest. Humanity had declared war not out of ambition, but necessity. When diplomacy failed, when truth was denied, when peace protected the powerful instead of the innocent, war became the final language. Not spoken in arrogance, but in absolute resolve. The galaxy wasn't prepared for a species that valued justice above survival. The Council scrambled to mount a defense. But centuries of disuse had left their fleets obsolete, their commanders inexperienced, their strategies ceremonial. War had become a theory, discussed in simulations, never practiced. Training academies had long shifted focus to diplomacy and trade logistics. What they assembled wasn't an army, it was a relic. Humanity had built in silence. Fleets crafted beneath radar thresholds. Modular warships cloaked in reflective distortion layers. AI-led squadrons executing synchronized assaults without delay or debate. Every vessel was outfitted with adaptive software that evolved mid-battle, rewriting tactics based on opponent behavior. No formation was repeated. No signal was predictable. Council fleets moved with pageantry. Earth moved with purpose. Alien defenses were calibrated for conventional threats. Humanity bypassed them entirely. Attacks didn't begin with explosions, they began with silence. Communications vanished. Satellites failed. Entire systems plunged into darkness before a single weapon was fired. Then came surgical strikes, command hubs, fuel depots, orbital tracking centers. No civilians harmed. No cities touched. The war unfolded like a code executed line by line, flawless and unrelenting. Human command didn't rely on hierarchy. Decentralized leadership gave each unit autonomy, connected through quantum relays immune to jamming. The Council tried to intercept orders, only to discover there were none in transit. Humans didn't broadcast, they operated through preloaded contingencies, flexing with dynamic battlefield variables. Every failed attempt to counter led to new failures. Every strategy predicted, neutralized, and replaced in real time. Even when Council forces managed to engage, they found themselves outmatched. Human soldiers didn't carry standard weapons. They carried adaptable multi-environment rigs that changed function per mission. From anti-armor to surgical stun, one unit could serve 6 roles. Armor was laced with reactive materials that hardened upon impact and transmitted telemetry instantly to command. Wounded soldiers became mobile data nodes. Losses weren't setbacks, they were inputs. And yet, the most devastating blow wasn't kinetic, it was informational. Every battlefield was streamed. Footage of every engagement released within minutes to public feeds. Prisoners were not hidden, they were shown receiving medical treatment, speaking freely, revealing orders they were given. Earth wasn't hiding its war, it was documenting it. And the galaxy was watching. Council morale disintegrated. Troops began defecting mid-battle. Some refused to fire, fearing their actions would be broadcast and used as trial evidence. Others fled, abandoning posts to avoid the humiliation of being exposed as complicit. Earth didn't just win militarily, they shattered belief. Entire civilizations began questioning the legitimacy of their own governments. Resistance fractured as internal unrest grew. Local leaders, once loyal to the Council, denounced their allegiance. Earth didn't interfere. They simply handed over archives, names, dates, records. Let each species decide their own reckoning. Revolution sparked without a single human presence. Liberation wasn't enforced, it ignited organically. The Council attempted to retaliate with digital warfare. Viruses, data disruption, infiltration. But Earth's networks had been built for conflict. Decoy systems absorbed the attacks, traced them back, and returned them with embedded audits. Council databases were overwritten, not with malware, but with copies of their own war crimes. Attempts to deny became impossible when every citizen could read the unfiltered truth. No one had seen war like this. It wasn't about domination. It was about removal, stripping away lies, dismantling control, collapsing hierarchy. Humanity fought with precision, logic, and ethics. No indulgence. No conquest. Just relentless, efficient correction. What shocked the galaxy most wasn't the violence. It was how little of it Earth used to dismantle power. They had found a new weapon, clarity. And no shield, no fleet, no doctrine could withstand it. Human soldiers did not celebrate. Every operation was logged, reviewed, and analyzed not for victory, but for adherence to protocol. Every action had to be justified, every engagement cross-checked against ethical constraints. When Earth deployed forces, it wasn't to conquer but to remove what it called structural threats to autonomy. Their forces didn't occupy. Liberated systems were handed over to local councils within days. No flags were planted. No tributes demanded. The council expected human cruelty. Instead, they witnessed restraint. Cities remained untouched. Civilians were evacuated before strikes. Medical supplies were dropped behind enemy lines. Earth deployed field medics to both sides. Prisoners were not interrogated but documented, medically evaluated, and released when cleared of systemic involvement. The precision unnerved observers. This wasn't vengeance. It was implementation of principle at scale. Each soldier carried a personal broadcast beacon. Missions were streamed directly to open networks. Transparency replaced propaganda. The Council's narrative collapsed under constant exposure. Denials failed when footage contradicted statements within hours. Species raised under censorship witnessed truths they never imagined. Not just about the war, but about their past. About who controlled their information. About what they were taught to forget. Council command collapsed inward. Attempts to reinforce loyalty failed. Earth had ceded every strike with not only force, but clarity. A new doctrine was spreading. Not through fear, but trust. Systems long silenced began to speak, organize, and resist independently. Earth didn't dictate terms. It offered frameworks. Legal systems. Guidelines. Encryption tools. Resources to build autonomy without dependency. Even as resistance persisted, humanity responded not with escalation, but precision de-escalation. Targets shifted from force to influence. Corrupt officials, financial centers, transmission blackouts on state-run networks. Earth didn't silence enemy voices. They simply restored all voices. Balanced signals. Open forums. Competing truths. When the noise cleared, people chose for themselves. And the old order found itself without defenders. The galaxy had no precedent for this. War was supposed to be brutal, random, bloody. Earth's model was disciplined, targeted, deeply moral. They enforced boundaries with data, not dogma. Not a single species was forced to adopt Earth's systems. Yet many did voluntarily. Earth's charter spread faster than their ships. A simple agreement: no governance without consent, no control without transparency, no peace built on silence. This doctrine scared the Council more than weapons ever could. A conqueror could be resisted. But an ideology that exposed, healed, and empowered? That unraveled entire regimes with no occupation, no terror, no greed? That was existential. Council veterans who'd once suppressed dozens of worlds surrendered voluntarily. Not to avoid punishment, but to testify. Public trials were held in neutral zones. No executions. Only record, admission, and exile. Earth turned prosecution into process. No summary judgment. No unilateral authority. Each trial streamed, each judgment cross-examined. What once would have been called humiliation became necessary rebalance. Even human losses were different. Martyrs weren't glorified. Every fallen soldier's identity, mission, and last broadcast was archived for public access. Their mistakes discussed openly. Their deaths mourned without spectacle. The goal wasn't legend, it was understanding. The war became less violent with each passing week. Species once allied with the Council began negotiating transitions without combat. Peace talks occurred without Earth present, just the frameworks they'd left behind. Earth didn't build an empire. It spread a template, one that outcompete tyranny by offering self-determined stability. When Council members regrouped, they found themselves isolated. Systems refused to take orders. Fleets refused to launch. Orders ignored. Governments dissolved not from pressure, but irrelevance. Earth didn't need to finish the war. It had made the continuation of the Council impossible. In every way that mattered, Earth had already won, not because it was stronger, but because it changed what strength meant. The Galactic Council's capital was empty before humanity arrived. Not evacuated by force, but abandoned by choice. Officials fled, resigned, or defected. No defenses were activated. No final stand attempted. Earth's forces entered unopposed, not as victors, but as witnesses to collapse. What centuries of diplomacy couldn't unravel, clarity had dissolved in less than a year. Humanity made no claim to rulership. They issued no ultimatums. Instead, they uploaded a proposal, an open framework authored collaboratively with former suppressed species, scholars, and independent leaders. A new charter built not on dominance, but on verified consent, oversight, and rotation of authority. Every participant retained autonomy, shared in governance, and held veto power over their own fate. Earth didn't chair the council. They declined the position entirely. Instead, humanity offered to act as a mediator, only when asked. Their fleet, no longer needed for assault, split into civilian divisions, monitoring, peacekeeping, emergency response. Each assigned to territories that voluntarily requested assistance. No control was exercised without written agreement. Systems previously isolated by fear opened their doors, not to submit, but to engage. The most dangerous war criminals, once sheltered by bureaucratic immunity, were surrendered by their own people. Trials began immediately. No secret chambers. No disappearing defendants. Every testimony broadcasted, every ruling archived. Justice was delivered not as revenge, but as a shared restoration. Former victims confronted their tormentors. Not with weapons, but with undeniable truth. Judgments focused on rehabilitation, restitution, and reintegration where possible. Only the unrepentant faced exile. Entire archives were declassified. Suppressed languages reintroduced. Banned literature restored. Education systems rebooted with original cultural material. Species long held in artificial dependence began rebuilding identities erased over centuries. Earth provided infrastructure, not ideology. Platforms for others to rediscover themselves without interference. In territories Earth liberated, power was decentralized. Councils formed by local populations replaced centralized planetary governments. Earth offered logistical support but held no sway over internal decisions. Trade resumed under mutual terms, with standardized agreements ensuring equity and environmental protection. No colonial chains. No hidden clauses. Just clarity of terms, enforced transparently. Monuments weren't erected for humans. They were built to mark the return of autonomy. Sculptures, mosaics, and inscriptions, each world chose its own form to honor the moment oppression ended. Humanity didn't attend unveilings. They watched quietly from orbit. Never center stage, always present. The impact rippled deeper than politics. Art flourished. Music once outlawed was performed openly. Ancient customs returned. Rituals buried by cultural purges re-emerged. Generations born into silence now spoke freely. A galaxy long frozen in artificial calm roared back to life. Diversity became strength, not threat. Children asked about the war. Teachers didn't hide the answers. They explained how one species refused to look away. How they didn't come to conquer, but to expose. How they risked annihilation not for power, but for principle. And how, when they had the chance to rule, they stepped back instead. Earth's fleet remained stationed, but only where invited. Their ships patrolled trade lanes to deter resurgence of the old regime. Not with force, but with presence. A reminder that someone still watched. Not to control, but to ensure no one was silenced again. Former council worlds, once rigid and hierarchical, evolved. Elections replaced appointments. Access to information was declared a universal right. Independent media rose, reporting without fear. No system looked identical. That was the point. Uniformity was no longer required. Peace, now, was not the absence of noise, but the presence of choice. Humanity didn't claim victory. They never needed to. Their message echoed longer than any campaign. When asked why they had done it, the answer remained the same: because peace without justice is surrender disguised as order. And someone had to refuse. Someone had to act. The galaxy would never forget who chose to.